This week on Quality Digest Live, strengthening the pipeline of STEM workers.
Plus, we chat with industrial statistician Doug Fair of Infinity QS. That more when we come back.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for September 28th, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme.
Yes, he is.
And, we talk a lot on this show about many of the technologies and programs at NIST. NIST is very important within our industry, test and measurement, metrology. And usually what we talk about is, for instance, the Baldrige program, also something from NIST.
Yep.
It's very important. Or MEPs, the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships. Yep. And sometimes it's about new technology out of NIST. But I think what we don't talk about enough is NIST's outreach programs, of which there are many, but particularly those programs related to STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM education. And so if you want to read about some of the exciting things, really exciting things that NIST is doing with STEM outreach, take a look at Janita Pritchett's article, Strengthening the STEM Workforce Pipeline Through Outreach. Pritchett is an academic program manager in the NIST International and Academic Affairs Office. And so this, of course, STEM out, she's also an associate professor. So obviously STEM, science, technology, she works for NIST. Obviously this is all very close to her heart. And I wanted just to highlight a few of the things that Pritchett, through NIST, is doing in order to excite particularly young minority women in STEM topics. So for instance, Pritchett spoke at the Black Women's Agenda 40th Annual Symposium Workshop and Awards Luncheon. Black Women's Agenda had launched a couple years ago, 2014 I think, Inform and Inspire, which is a series of workshops that give middle school girls, so 7th and 8th graders, or 6th, 7th and 8th girls, a chance to explore STEM careers, and this is important, meet African American women working in these fields. As I said, women and minorities in particular are really underrepresented in STEM education or in STEM topics, so this was really a great opportunity to reach out to them. Pritchett also teamed up with Miss USA 2017, Cara McCullough, who is a former physical scientist at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and she teamed up with her to help launch the nonprofit Science Exploration for Kids, or the SE4K, Science Education for Kids.
Cool.
That program offers interactive science-related programs for students in K through 12. And what's cool about this program, says Pritchett, is that while there is obviously learning, that's the goal of it, it also focuses on things like teamwork and self-confidence and career development, all while having fun. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's important about, keep in mind about these programs, is the idea is to excite kids, not just, here's some science and technology, engineering and math, isn't this boring? It's, no, this is exciting stuff. Mm-hmm. Here's what's going on with it. These programs tend to be very hands-on and interactive to get kids to see what's going on in STEM topics and not to be afraid of it. And the problem is when you're afraid of something, it makes it harder to learn. If you're excited about it, it's easier to learn. It's just a little connection the brain makes, right? If it's hard, if it's boring, it must be hard.
You put up, exactly.
Okay, there's also a couple other programs I want to mention. STEMversity, which is a nonprofit located in Milledgeville, Georgia, that offers training and educational programs for those preparing to enter college or the workforce, especially areas that have historically lacked diversity. And in fact, in 2016, NIST awarded STEMversity a 3-year measurement science and engineering research grant to support the advancement of the program itself. So very important on that. And another program, STEAM Forward, STEAM Forward, which Pritchett launched last year specifically for the kids at the NIST Child Care Center. NIST is a big organization. They've got their own child care center there. And it features weekly interactive low-cost hands-on activities that explore topics related to the different career paths at NIST. So this is a great thing, and this is stuff that we're seeing not only in industry-sponsored STEM programs, which kind of show the industry side of STEM, which is important, but we're seeing programs like those at NIST that are coming from the topic from a broader perspective, particularly the broader perspective that NIST can offer. So I think these type of programs are what industry and organizations like NIST are doing to get kids excited, get them growing in order to fill, again, this skills gap that we see that really needs people skilled in science, technology, engineering, and math.
And what she's focused on here is women.
Particularly, you can see a lot of these programs, young girls and women in particular, and also minorities.
Minorities, and you talk about, the lack of diversity, you really do see it. If you go to like a NIST, sorry, you go to like an IMTS or a CMSA, you really do see, increasingly you see more women.
More women and more minorities, but it's only recently.
It's really just recently. So these are really important initiatives, to bring more people in, because we need as many people in these industries as we can. These are good jobs. I'm going to be actually covering a story later in the show showing that there's really going to be a lot of openings in manufacturing in the coming years that may or may not be able to be easily filled from the existing pool of candidates. So this is important stuff. So I'm glad that Janetta. There it is right there, Janita Pritchett.
Janita Pritchett, right.
So I'm glad she's doing that. Good stuff there. Okay. Well, earlier this week, we ran the first half of an article titled "Making Sense of Manufacturing Data," and the second half will appear on the QD site in mid-October. These articles feature Doug Fair, and Doug is a hardworking industrial statistician. He is also the Chief Operating Officer of Infinity QS, and Infinity QS is a company offering quality intelligence and quality control solutions for industry. Most of you out there watching us today are manufacturers, and I'm sure that many of you are fighting an enemy that's supposed to be your friend, data, right? It's a fact of life for manufacturers in 2018 that too much data are every bit as bad as too little data, maybe worse actually. And it's what you do to sort and organize your data that allows you to turn that into what you really want and can leverage for quality improvement, and that is information, right? Okay, so with us now to chat about these issues and more is Doug Fair himself. So Doug Fair, thanks for joining us on Quality Digest Live.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course, thank you.
So Doug, Mike just mentioned here that we're talking about two things. We've got data and there's information. And a lot of people think these are the same thing, that data and information are the same thing, but you would argue that they aren't. So what's the difference between data and information?
Yeah, great question. They're very different. For me, data is, imagine a single number. That's data. And information is, and I just Googled this morning, but Google says that information are facts that are learned from something. And so when we think about data, imagine a spreadsheet filled with numbers. It could be hundreds or thousands of individual data values. Those data values, if you've ever seen spreadsheets like that, it's very difficult to discern what's happening with the data. So if you want information from that data, you need to contextualize it. You need to know, well, okay, how does this number compare with another number within the data set? So I contend that companies today are data rich and information poor. But if you want to get information from data, you've got to be able to do some comparative analysis with it. You've got to be able to contextualize the data. What I mean by that is you need to know, okay, how do they compare with one another? How do they compare to specification limits? And if we can do those sorts of comparative analyses, then we get information from that data. So I think that companies today, they gather a lot of data, but what they really need is the information from it. I like to call it data interrogation. And when you look at this data and you apply data aggregation techniques or statistical techniques to this data, that's where you get the information from it, and that's where you can make that data collection exercise so very valuable to your company.
And Doug, a lot of people in industry today, again, I think a lot of our people may be watching right now, a lot of them are gathering data just because they can, just because they think they should. Things like you mentioned in your article, the article that we did, we interviewed you about PLCs. People can pull so much data now. And they think they should, but there's a downside to that too. All that conglomeration of so much data. What is that all about?
Yeah, there's a huge downside to it. But let me talk first about why people, what I've seen at least in terms of why organizations gather data. First of all, I've had companies tell us, look, we're gathering this data because our customers have asked us to do so. In other words, their customers want visibility into the quality of their vendors' products. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing, but hey, it's one reason why companies gather data. Another reason is I've seen this too often. I've seen companies say, well, we might need this data at some time in the future. And it's kind of a just in case sort of reason for gathering data. And that can be very expensive and time consuming. But another reason why companies gather data is just because they feel like the technology today is inexpensive. So when we look at information technologies, yes, they are far less expensive than they used to be. And it's awesome. It's great because now we can deploy systems around companies and help us to learn more about what we're doing. But the downside is that if data is inexpensive to, or at least seemingly inexpensive to gather, then what companies will typically do, they'll need to invest in IT technology. So that means databases, it means servers, it means the IT infrastructure. And it also means you've got to invest in IT expertise, whether from a third party or from hiring IT experts within the organization. But then you also have to think about maintenance contracts, support contracts, and the expenditures required on a daily basis to support those systems. So it can be massively expensive. And I'm just talking about one plant. But now if you start talking about some of the companies we work with that have 20, 30, hundreds of different plants around the world, you're talking about a massive investment. And if that investment in technology doesn't have a good strategic reason for why data should be collected, then I think you're looking at great expenditure for not a lot of value. So for me, I believe that today's biggest expenditures are on the IT side, and it doesn't have to be that way because companies are realizing that this paradigm of deploying IT technologies on the shop floor, that paradigm's going away because of the advent of software as a service products. And these software as a service products basically say, hey, look, all you need is a computing device, whether it's a computer, a laptop, or a tablet computer, or even a smartphone, but you just need a computing device and an internet access, either through cellular or Wi-Fi or whatever, and that's how you can run your quality system these days. And it does not require much in the way of infrastructure or support. And so that paradigm of deploying IT technologies within a company is really going away. And again, to reduce costs, companies are seeing that hey, they can really do this and do it well with software as a service products.
And you bring up the point that there's just not a lot of real information you can get out of some of this data. I mean, if you're taking data every second, every millisecond in some cases, right? I mean, things like temperature don't really change that much in certain dyes, for instance. I mean, so this data gluttony, you call it, is the term you've used, is really damaging.
It is very much so. I call it data gluttony. It's organizations, they say, hey, we've got this data, it's available to us. We get every few milliseconds, we get the speeds, feeds, temperatures, whatever they're getting on their PLCs and their servers and whatnot. And they say, hey, we ought to gather it. But to save that data to a database or put it in the cloud or wherever it is being placed, it has to be stored. And it can be massively expensive to do that, especially, again, if you're talking about lots of plants across several regions. So I call it data gluttony, but really what companies need to be able to do is say, okay, we've got access to this data. What's really important to us? And sometimes that does require that a lot of data gets collected, but then you need to sort out the vital few features that we want to check that drive the quality of a product and separate out the trivial many so that we focus on things that are really important to us. And when you get to that point, it's no longer data gluttony. What it really is, it's a strategic means of improving the efficiency, the effectiveness of your manufacturing organization, and also reducing costs, getting quality better, and becoming a more competitive company out there.
And Doug, you and Infinity QS, you work with a lot of different types of companies. I mean, we talk about manufacturing, but there's other companies you work with too. So what would you say is the difference in quality outlook and strategy in terms of data and information for manufacturers versus, let's say a healthcare organization or a semiconductor fab? I mean, there's different kinds of organizations that do different things with their data and with their information. So what are some of those differences?
Right. Well, there are a tremendous number of similarities I've found. So whether you're making furniture or you're making medical devices or pharmaceutical products or food and beverage products, aerospace, automotive, there's a tremendous number of similarities between those different companies or different industries and how they approach quality. One similarity is that there's no shortage of competition. in every single market niche that I've seen, every company I've worked with, there's tremendous competitive forces trying to gather, a piece of that niche pie or that manufacturing industry pie. And so that's true. And then also, you've got customers today who are demanding higher quality products, and yet they want lower prices. So that puts tremendous pressure on margins for organizations these days. Whether you're a medical device manufacturer or someone that makes electronics, it just doesn't matter. So there are very similar challenges faced today, depending on, regardless of the industry that you look at. We are also seeing that what's interesting is that, talking about paradigms earlier, organizations are also seeing that, wait a minute, if we can look at data in its aggregate, if we can go and compare data values and our quality and get information across multiple plants, across the value chain even into the supplier base, if we can do that, then we can take cost out, because I think that's probably the last great opportunity for organizations to take a tremendous amount of cost out of the system, and also to tremendously improve quality, is by looking beyond their four walls and looking into the value chain.
And Doug, really quickly here in the time we have left, I think everybody understands, or most people understand, that part of the value of collecting data on a process is that, among other things, you can spot when a process is out of spec, when it's exceeding its control limits and so forth, and then you can take action, take a look at that, special cause, signable cause, all that sort of stuff. Do something with that in order to bring your process back in line. But you argue that there's also value in looking at processes that are in spec that are running along just fine.
Yeah, I do, and it's from experience. I'm an old school quality guy. I've been doing this 31 years, and what I've found is that as a quality professional, I have great respect for my colleagues because they are fantastic problem solvers. We get out there, and when there's a problem, we fix it. We're the firefighters, and we fix things. But what I've found is that there's data out there that's forgotten. It's the forgotten data. We focus so much on the problems and the firefight that we forget about other data, and that data is the data that's within specification limits. And my experience has been, after working with a lot of companies over the years, is that just by looking at data that's within spec, you can get extraordinary information from that data that can make massive improvements in the organization in terms of quality and productivity. One company I worked with was a beverage manufacturer with 20 plus production lines. These guys just took some fill volumes over a few weeks, and they found out that everything was in spec. It was all good. They didn't underfill bottles. They didn't overfill them. But what we found was that there was tremendous information from that data within spec. It was all in spec. Tremendous information that allowed them to reduce their fills and do this in a very significant way, and then also make the fill volumes very consistent from one bottle to the next. The net result was they were able to identify about $1.1 million in annual savings in those raw materials they're putting in those bottles. And that was on one production line. So this company, after looking at their 20 plus production lines, they were estimating about $20+ million a year of savings just by looking at data that was in spec. So it was a pretty extraordinary thing, and that's not just one. It's not just one company I've seen that's done that. I've never seen a data set that wasn't chock full of information, and so I advise organizations today to look very carefully at data that's within spec. It's the forgotten data. It's the data that no one ever looks at anymore because it's not a problem. And so, and my advice is to look at that data on a very frequent, regular basis, and make it a part of your strategic means of improving your plant, your operations, your company.
Well, Doug Farrar of Infinity QS, thanks for joining us today on Quality Digest Live. Always a lot of great information from you and from the folks at Infinity QS. Again, the name of the article, Making Sense of Manufacturing Data. We got part 2 of that coming up for you in mid-October, so look out for that. And Doug, thanks again for joining us today.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Right, see ya.
So long.
Bye.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, we've been talking a lot about industry and manufacturing on the show today. You know what, Dirk? We're going to keep that ball rolling.
Yay.
We're just going to keep going with that one because we got a lot more good stuff coming for you. There's a piece that we ran this week, a news piece called "Hey America, You're Wrong. Manufacturing is not failing, it's flourishing." And we published that in Wednesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. We linked out to it.
Some people might disagree.
Well, we're going to look at this because this is some interesting information here. The article discusses a recent survey from Leading to Lean, and they're a software company providing production maintenance and product quality solutions for manufacturers. The Leading to Lean Manufacturing Index surveyed 1,000 online respondents, and the results provided some interesting insights into the perceptions and the realities for those in industry today. And I'm going to go through a couple of these perceptions and the realities that underpin them. The first perception from the survey, 70% of respondents believe that U.S. manufacturing industry is declining, and 58% believe that the number of jobs in the sector is going down. Okay, 70% is declining, 58% say that the number of jobs is going down. The reality, according to a recent Deloitte survey quoted in the piece, is that 3.5 million manufacturing jobs are going to be needed to be filled in the coming decade. So
jobs are out there.
The jobs are out there, and then more of them are coming. 3.5 million. We talked about the Janetta Pritchard article where women are coming into the manufacturing space, minorities coming into the space through STEM education. This is why we need these jobs to be filled. Another perception. Just 55% of respondents felt that manufacturing offers fulfilling careers, and only 45% feel that these jobs are attractive to younger workers.
Wow.
Okay,
that explains a big problem, doesn't
not
it?
a great perception, but what's the reality? According to the company review site Glassdoor, I don't know if any of you use Glassdoor, but it's an interesting site. The average salary for a manufacturing supervisor is more than $64,000. For a manufacturing engineer, it's more than $71,000.
Keep saying we're in the wrong job, man.
And for a director of manufacturing, it's more than $146,000.
Definitely in the wrong job.
That's almost what Dirk makes.
Yeah, right.
So in a decade. So that's some good money, man. I mean, $146,000. I mean, obviously you have to be a senior person to get there.
Right.
But I mean, these
are opportunities are there.
These are not. Yeah, this is not a career without opportunities, and that's the takeaway. I mean, we've talked a lot about that manufacturing has some great opportunities available, but there's a perception gap. There's a perception problem out there. And that's one of the things that's holding back is that gap. I mean, the idea that the work is unappealing, it's boring, it's dirty, it's hard, whatever, but it's high tech, it's cool, it's interesting. There's a lot of good opportunities out there, and this Leading to Lean survey really indicates that that's the truth, and that people really need to change their perception about what manufacturing and industry is all about. It's good stuff to think about.
And you'll talk about this later, but Manufacturing Week is coming up.
Manufacturing Day, that's right.
Manufacturing Day, and that's part of what Manufacturing Day tries to show is that, hey, it isn't what you thought it was anymore.
That's right. It's not your grandfather's manufacturing job.
Well, speaking of technology and manufacturing, technology is changing the way that we use and develop our supply chains. And as we roll out more technology, things like artificial intelligence. Thank you very much. Artificial intelligence and augmented reality and the industrial Internet of Things and RFID tagging and GPS tracking and so forth. Companies struggle to keep up with or even use the data, and that is coming in. And all this can make supplier development a headache or a nightmare. Where do you start? What tools do you use? What software do you use? Does it even make financial sense to pursue some of the formal supplier development? Well, a lot of groundwork has already been done in this area in the automotive, semiconductor, and medical devices and aerospace industries with supplier development. And each of these industries has their own specific methods on how they handle supplier improvement and supplier development. And other industries can learn from that. What has worked best and why? How can you design win-win strategies with suppliers? Well, here to talk with us today to talk about supplier development is Chad Keimel of Omnix. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Dirk. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing good.
Good. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for joining us. So let's start with supplier development. What really does that mean from your perspective, and how do you consider it important for industry?
So, we're talking about, these industries that have a good supplier management, supplier improvement process and methodology. These companies, these organizations typically have certain requirements for the supply base that by itself becomes a supply improvement. For example, the aerospace industry has AS9100. The automotive industry has IATF 16949, and so on. And from time to time, these industries also will put in requirements for, let's say, Lean Six Sigma or an award program, which companies will aspire for, which will be really good for them, but also they will have to really improve themselves. So typically, when you think about supplier improvement or the supplier improvement programs Omnex has been a part of, it's typically to reduce parts per million defects. It is to reduce cost. So sometimes we'll do a Lean Six Sigma program that we take a part with and we work with the supply base. Sometimes it's on new product development. So implementing methodologies like APQP and FMEAs, failure mode effects analysis. And all of these, supply improvement programs, either help the supplier and the customer in new product development, parts per million defects, or example, cost with Lean and Six Sigma.
And Chad, you mentioned several industries earlier here. Can you give me an example of, I guess what you'd call best-in-class supplier development that you've run across in I don't know, aerospace or automotive or something?
Absolutely, Dirk. In fact, a paper that I'm writing for Quality Digest, and then later doing in a webinar, cites several different improvement projects we're a part of. I mean, being a 30, 32, or 33-year-old company now, we had our start in the 1980s working with what is called they called it a Deming. Dr. Deming helped Ford write this Q101 standard. Great standard. Huge improvement in the supply base. So that's something we were a part of. Then after that, we actually helped Ford with something called quality operating systems, writing that methodology, but that was aimed at top management. You better go fast. We also helped, the semiconductor industry came from Silicon Valley, where you guys are in California, came looking for a partner, and we ended up helping everybody in Silicon Valley and all their suppliers in Asia. All right, but the one I want to talk to you about is something we did for Volvo Truck in Southeast Asia. Volvo, by the way, a very successful launch with Quester truck. It was considered the most successful launch in Quester truck. How did they do it? Well, they had greenfields in China, India, and Thailand. 3 new plants. That's called high risk, by the way. New product and 200 new suppliers. Wow. And we got a chance to work with each of those suppliers. We assessed them. And it was a very comprehensive assessment, really wonderful Volvo assessment that we helped work with. And we came up with improvement points for each of the suppliers and then worked with them over a period of a year to improve them and help them do something that's called a PPAP, a production part approval process. But that was just an outcome. We actually helped them in all facets of their organization using this assessment and using this action plan for improvement. So, especially when answering that question, let me cite this Volvo truck Quester product launch we were a part of as, it was considered one of the most successful product launches by Volvo as one of our very successful best-in-class programs.
So Chad, finally, in a couple minutes we have left here for you, Dirk talked in his intro a little bit about technology. So maybe you can help us understand how supplier development is affected and impacted by things like artificial intelligence or machine learning and things like that.
So, Mike, we have been very hard at work at Omnex. We know Quality 4.0, or what we call disruptive technologies, as the US calls it, and Industry 4.0 is imminently at us. So one of the things we are doing, and this is for all the listeners out there, in the day-to-day drudgery work that we all do is going to go away. So one of the things we ourselves have done is we have built an AI machine learning platform on the Omnex software supplier quality management system suite. Let me give you some examples of what this will do. So typically in best-in-class organizations, when there's a failure, you will ask your supplier to fill out what is called an 8D, or discipline problem solving. Can be any method, of course. And in the future, the near future, because we're working on the future now, your 8D will be evaluated by the software when you're entering it in, and then later on, it will let you know if the problem description was any good, the root causes are right, if the corrective action is action-oriented, and all the different things, evaluations that it will do, and it'll track the 8D and make sure the 8D is completed, or problem solving is completed. As an example, your supplier, assessments, sorry, not the assessments as much as your product package for new product development. Imagine that's going to be qualified, dimensional reports are going to be examined, all of that going to be examined by AI and machine learning. So we are into a wonderful time, and we've had very good success working with AI and machine learning and the SMEs in helping make this happen.
So Chad, when you're saying it examines the 8D, you're saying that it looks at what the user is input into the various fields, the root cause and so forth, and it tries to discern whether that makes sense or
yeah, is it a good, this is, in fact, so when we teach supplier quality engineers, they have to be good enough to understand how to evaluate AD. It's a talent that comes after many years. We're going to be able to actually get that done, right off the chute. Let me just tell you a little bit more what this will do. Once you identify what is a problem and what is the root cause, it actually happened, right? It'll help you transfer that into the FMEA, failure mode effects analysis, which is a preventive tool to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. So all these different linkages and the evaluations of what a human can do will be done with software, with AI and machine learning in the future.
Yeah, interesting. So that's going to free up a lot more time for for people to do things that are more important than enter information on a form.
Absolutely. If there is a job out there, there's a drudgery work that somebody is examining day in and day out, that is going to disappear in the next 5 years.
All right. Well, Chad Keimel, CTO of Omnex Incorporated. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, you'll want to mark your calendar for Tuesday, October 9th. That's when Chad will be presenting a webinar titled Supplier Development Strategies Case Studies. And there'll be more of what Chad was just talking about here. The event gets started at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And again, that's Tuesday, October 9th. Register now if you haven't already for that, and be sure to join up. It's going to be an action-packed webinar.
Chad always does a great job.
And yeah,
Thank
Chad
you,
does
guys.
And by the way, I believe you're actually having kind of a panel discussion on this one. Is that right?
Yes, we are. We have invited 3 of our, suppliers from different industries to take a part in a panel discussion, and and make it an interactive session to provide value to all the listeners.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, you have a little extra time out there, everyone, to register for this. You have almost 2 full weeks, so make sure you get on the stick and register for that one. It's going to be a good presentation.
There will be a link. There will be a link to that webinar underneath the player page. Not this one right now, but in a few, probably in about an hour, it'll be down there. You can click that link and go out and register, or you will be getting information in your email inbox. So be sure to look for that and sign up. These webinars are always really good. They fill up, and they're always very interactive. So you'll get a lot of good questions for Chad.
So thanks, Chad.
Thank you, Mike and Dirk.
We'll see you on October 9th. Thanks again, Chad.
All right. Well, thanks also to Doug Fair of Infinity QS for joining us earlier on the show, and Chad Keimel, obviously.
We just saw there, right? And don't forget that Chad has the webinar. We just mentioned it. Of course, Supplier Development Strategies. And Dirk, you're hosting that. That is October 9th. Right. Again, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Right. You're the host, Chad's the presenter. So.
And he's got, like he mentions, he's got a couple of industry people on there as well to join in a roundtable. So
that's right. And then, yeah, well, let's note this too, because we're not actually doing Quality Digest Live next Friday. Next Friday, we have a programming note for you. We're going to be doing not QDL, but we're going to be doing our second annual virtual test and measurement expo. You can see it right there on Manufacturing Day across the country. That is next Friday, October 5th, and the same time as we normally do our stuff at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be sponsored by Faro. It's going to have a great demo for you. CMS, our partners at the Coordinated Metrology Society, are partnering with us on that as well. A lot of good stuff on that show, Dirk. Some technical demos. You're going to have a chance to chat with application engineers, ask some questions, find out about what's going on in Manufacturing Day. So mark your calendars for that as well. You'll be getting more information on that later today, as well as next week if you want to register for that event. So check out your email. We're going to be emailing you that. Come up here probably the next couple days.
Yeah, a couple days.
That's it. All right. Well, you guys all have a great weekend. You
All right,
too.
you too. So long.
We'll see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.